Today on Nexus Talk, I discuss all the modes of PvP in WildStar, and there's only one thing that I like, and that is whistling in the dark. Let's get to it. Howdy folks, and welcome back to another episode of Nexus Talk. My name is Richie, aka Otter, and this show is all about the upcoming MMO, WildStar. Now today is episode number 3, and we're going to be discussing the various modes of PvP. Now there is some of these modes that we know a lot of information about, and some we don't know too much about. So what I'm probably going to do is just do an overview of all things PvP today, and then in subsequent episodes of the Nexus Talk, I'll cover them more in detail once we have more information on it. Does that sound good? Okay, I'll assume you said yes. So let's start with arenas. Arenas is the first mode I'm going to be discussing. They are, basically if you played World of Warcraft, you kind of know how this works. You can have teams of 2, teams of 3, and teams of 5, and you will try to smash the enemy in some sort of arena battle. Now, unlike World of Warcraft, it's not just going to be this single elimination bout. You will have a number of respawns per team, and you will have to eliminate the other team's respawns and then kill any surviving opponents before you can actually win the match. And this is kind of an interesting change. It's a small change, but it really changes the dynamic. In arenas and other games, it's usually target the healer or crowd control the healer, get the healer out of the picture, and then the fight becomes a lot easier. But with the healers being able to come back, maybe that strategy changes a little bit, right? Maybe instead you want to take out somebody who's like a glass cannon, who's very easy to take out, not somebody who can heal themselves or not somebody that's a tank. And speaking of tanks, in this environment, a tank might be actually a really good character to play, right? Not only are you not going to use a lot of respawns because you're really difficult to take out, but you have different abilities like your taunt will actually reduce damage to anybody else besides the tank. So if you taunt your opponent, if they try to attack somebody else besides you, they're going to do less damage to them. You can also tether people. You can set an anchor on them so that they can't move a certain distance away from that anchor unless they destroy the anchor or the spell effect wears off. You can also do things like pull, like a scorpion wire type ability, So it makes tanks a little bit more interesting in that kind of arena environment. So that's how that works. That's the major change. We don't know too much more information about how many maps they're going to be or anything like that, but it sounds like a cool twist on the arena formula. The next mode of PvP is Battlegrounds, okay, and this is going to be for teams of 10 and teams of 15. By the way, I love that they just, call them Battlegrounds because, coming up with a different name for all the different things that really mean the same thing. We don't need to call them structured PvP or war zones or anything like that. They're Battlegrounds. We know them as that. So anyway, so teams of 10, teams of 15 will compete in these things. We know of 2 different modes right now. We know that there's one capture the flag style thing. But there's an interesting twist on it. So instead of having 2 flags at, one at each base, there is a flag in the middle. Okay, and so people are going to race to the middle, try to get that flag and bring it back to their base to capture it. So it's kind of murder ball-ish a little bit, and it's kind of a little bit like hut ball where you have to bring the ball to your end zone. But the twist here is that you plant your flag in your base to score, but somebody can come and steal that flag, even though it's a scored point. So you could be going for the second flag. They can take the first flag out, and basically you lose that point, and they can score it on their side. So you have to constantly defend your planted flags as well as go after the new flag that spawns in the middle. Again, a very small twist, but it really changes the gameplay. So I think that's going to be really fun and interesting. The next one, the game type for Battlegrounds that we know of is, I think it's temporarily called Hold the Line, and it sounds like an assault mission, right? We've seen this in some shooters, and Star Wars: The Old Republic had an assault war zone. 2 teams, one's on offense, one's on defense, and you're trying to get through certain checkpoints before time runs out, or whoever can do it the quickest. And then you switch, and the other team goes offense, and you go defense, and you just see who can do the assault mission in a quicker amount of time. So those are typically fun. Players seem to enjoy those. That's all the information we have right now on the types of Battlegrounds, but hopefully we'll have more information on those soon. And the last and probably most unique of the PvP systems that we know about is called Warplots. And this is kind of like hardcore stuff. You have to have a team, I think it's 20 or 40. These are like raid size things. And what you do is when you hit max level, you get your first Warplot, I believe for free, and you can kind of customize your defense and your offensive capabilities on this Warplot. It uses the socket and plug system from the housing system, the housing feature they have, and I'll talk about housing in a future episode. But so you can find things in the world or purchase things in the world, or adventure to locate different things, and you can bring them back to your Warplot and slot them into different sockets. And that'll determine, how defensive or offensive your Warplot is. You can build things like walls and turrets and different types of machinery. And what you do is then you queue up and you actually battle against other teams' Warplots. And depending on where you put certain offensive, defensive capabilities and how well your team mans those stations versus the other team will determine who the winner is. Now, some of the cool things that they said is, one of the examples is you can actually go on a raid, capture a raid boss in PvE, take this raid boss and actually slot it into your Warplot and use that raid boss to attack the other team during a Warplot. What? I mean, does that not sound like the most amazing thing ever? It's a cool mix of PvE that affects PvP. I want to capture a raid boss and then set it loose on other teams. That sounds really good to me. The other cool thing, and what kind of makes it a little bit more hardcore, is that if you actually lose a Warplot mission, there's a possibility, I don't know exactly how the mechanic works on this, there's a possibility that things in your Warplot will be destroyed and need to be rebuilt. So you can actually lose things, which I think is kind of cool. That especially because they're labeling this as a more hardcore experience. So Warplots in general just sounds like one of the more unique PvP experiences that I can't think of another MMO that does something that's similar. It kind of has a little bit of a sandboxy feel, right? A little bit of a tower defense kind of feel where you customize how your thing looks and then you battle it, and it's also large groups, which is cool. Now, in terms of open world PvP. There are going to be PvP servers, and you're going to be able to attack people of the opposing faction in contested areas and stuff. There'll also be like sanctuary areas where you camp. But there's not going to be any objectives for doing so, and there's no like zone that's dedicated to like a world versus world or a Tolbarad or something like that. It is strictly, kind of reminds me of basic vanilla classic World of Warcraft, right, where you can attack other players in a contested zone, but there's no real objective for doing so besides gaining some experience points and just killing them. So I know some players might want that more organized open world feel, but some other players might be really interested in this kind of PvP because you can have that kind of Torin Mill, South Shore rivalry thing that people always look back so fondly on, like, that was the best PvP ever, man. But, there's a possibility for something like that in WildStar. Now, just before I wrap up, just a couple other things that we know about PvP in general. We do know that they are working on leaderboards. They're going to have some sort of web-based leaderboards and character profiles. Not 100% going to be in for launch. They're hoping it will be. It kind of looks like it might be, but that looks like it's a promising feature. Spectator mode. Probably not going to be in for launch. They are seriously considering it. They do want it. I know that the PvP folks at Carbine have spoken on Reddit, and they definitely want that to be a feature. They realize it's important for things like esports and stuff like that, but probably not going to be in for launch. They also did they kind of did a community uplink where they asked, what are your concerns about PvP? And a lot of people said one of their big concerns was about what was the gear progression going to be like, right? What is it going to be, that everybody's on a level playing field, kind of like Guild Wars 2, or is there actually going to be gear progression, and how do they counteract people from stomping lower geared players and stuff? So they responded that they said that there is going to be gear progression in WildStar. And one of the ways they're going to combat it is they're going to have an ELO rating system and matchmaking so that you're, in these different PvP types, you are actually matched up with players of a similar skill level. And we know that works to a certain extent, and, but it doesn't solve all of the issues. They also said there's going to be this rallying mechanic. Now, I'm going to need a little bit of clarification here. I tried to find information on this to kind of clarify, but let me explain it. It's kind of like a sidekicking system, which we've seen in other games. and they kind of talked about rallying only in the lower level bracket situations where you might have a bracket of like level 10, I don't know what the levels are going to be, but let's say it's level 10 to level 20 bracket in Battlegrounds or something. And if you're a level 10, you're going to actually be bumped up to the maximum level of that bracket, level 20, and your gear will match the highest level gear that's available for that rank, so that you go in there and at least you have a shot, right? You're not just going to get steamrolled. Now, this kind of mechanic worked really well in like Star Wars: The Old Republic. They had something similar and such. But what confuses me about rallying is, they mentioned that, and I'll read the quote exactly. It says, the rallying system also normalizes gear to that level max, so you may enjoy as fair a fight as possible. Now, does this mean it's only going to be, rallying's only going to be there for lower than max level Battlegrounds and such? Or is this something that's also going to be at max level to kind of normalize the gear? Now, it didn't specifically say that, and I couldn't find any information, but it kind of brings up a couple questions. If rallying is going to be available at max level to kind of lessen the gap between people of disparate gear levels, then what's the point of having disparate gear levels? You might say, all right, well, you still want people to be able to unlock cool PvP skins and stuff. Well, then just make it cosmetic and don't have a gear level increase. So part of me thinks that rallying might not be at max level. And then I kind of bring up the concern that other people have. That, okay, now there's a gear grind. Now when I hit max level, there's going to be the best PvP players are going to have the best gear in the game because they play more dedicated, more skilled. They'll have the gear quicker. And it's just going to be, hard to catch up, or maybe frustrating to catch up. And this happened to me in Star Wars: The Old Republic. I'm a PvP dabbler, right? It's not my forte. But I really enjoyed the PvP in the leveling experience of Star Wars: The Old Republic. As soon as I got to max level and I started getting my face stomped into the ground, I tried to grind out some gear to kind of level the playing field, and then eventually it wasn't fun. It was not fun to actually get stomped over and over again while I waited to get better gear. So I stopped PvPing, and eventually I stopped playing Star Wars: The Old Republic altogether. One of the things I love about Guild Wars 2 is that I stink at PvP, but I can join any time, and I know that I'm stinking because I stink, and not because my gear is at a much lower level. So I'm hoping that they have some other way besides just the matchmaking to kind of counteract this, but we'll see how it plays out when we have more information. Rallying system could be just for lower levels. I hope there's some sort of bump for max levels as well, but we'll see how that works out. If you know anything, please let me know and link me some sources to kind of explain what I might have missed on the rallying front. The other thing that the feedback kind of brought forward was people's concern about stun locking. People don't like being out of control of their character for long periods of time. So they have a couple features that will combat this. One is called Interrupt Armor, which is a buff that both players and enemies and NPCs can get. And what it does is it basically absorbs crowd control. So let's say you have, 5 stacks of Interrupt Armor. Each crowd control that's used against you will take away a certain number of stacks. So something like a stun might take away 3 stacks of your Interrupt Armor, and something like a slow might take two stacks away. And then once you have no stacks of Interrupt Armor left, then you're susceptible to crowd control. So it's not going to be something that's going to always impact you. You will have some sort of protection against that. And abilities and such, I assume, can increase the stacks of this buff. Another thing is they called breakout gameplay is basically when you're under the effects of crowd control, there is going to be something that the player can do actively to try to get out of it. Maybe it's kind of like a quick little whack-a-mole or Twitch system where you have to hit a certain combination of keys to get out of it. We don't know any information besides what it's called, breakout gameplay. Hopefully we'll learn more about that soon, but it sounds like no matter what crowd control you're under, you're going to have some way of possibly getting out of your own volition, which I think is pretty cool. The last thing I'll mention is they did say that there's going to be different stats on PvP gear. There's going to be a PvP offensive stat and a PvP defensive stat to kind of separate that. That has a lot of implications. Some people think that that's a good idea. Some people not. They did do something like that in World of Warcraft. Eventually, because they used to have like resilience, but then they changed it to PvP offense, which increases your damage to other players, and PvP defense obviously counteracts that. So that is going to be something that's in the game. whether you like that or not. So let me know what you think about all these systems. I'm pretty excited by how much they're offering, right? It's just, a lot of, not a lot, but MMOs are tending to go towards more of this open world PvP focus, right? World versus World in Guild Wars 2. We're going to have the Alliance War in Elder Scrolls Online. Camelot Unchained is all about realm versus realm. So there's a big push for that. This game's kind of taking the opposite approach. It's just a lot of different games for small groups, games for medium-sized groups, and even really large groups with the Warplots. I think it's got a lot of potential, and I'm looking forward to dabbling in all of it because I'm a PvP dabbler. Well, once we know more in-depth information about any one of these topics, I might do another episode about them specifically. So leave me any questions or comments in the comments field below, and as usual, subscribe to my YouTube channel so you get notified when future videos are released. And you can also follow me on Facebook and Google Plus and Twitter and Twitch. I'll put all that information up on the screen for you and down below in the description. And I just want everybody to have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Oh, hey. I'm just putting the last final touches in on my Warplot. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to melt faces with it. There's only one thing left I need, and that's a raid boss!